Thanks, Enes, again, and thank you everyone for attending us today. To begin with, I would like to have a brief introduction myself. My name is Aysenur Yükselal. I'm the marketing manager in Vienna-based Riddle&Code blockchain interface company. Today, I will present our blockchain integrated hardware wallet real use cases for mobility, logistics, and energy. Then our Fintech Business Development Director, Berit Fuss, will talk about our custody solution for crypto exchanges and banking industries. And I believe they all can be very interesting for the Turkish blockchain participants. Our founder, Professor Fürstner, started to experiment with blockchain-based hardware solutions back in 2011. And he was, as an economist and also as a digital man, very much in deep the tricks of blockchain technology. He asked himself the question, how can we connect the physical industrial processes with the cryptographic security of blockchain technology? Therefore, he dedicated crypto chips because 5 or more years ago, there was nothing there to handle the blockchain technology. And in the end, he decided to design his own crypto chips. And when the industry started to move in 2016, Riddle&Code was set up as a proper company in Vienna. But the plan with Riddle&Code was not a specific hardware-focused company. Of course, software is the key here to connect the hardwares to blockchain. It was just a necessity for us to make the first steps with our own chips, with our own chips as kind of before the big chip manufacturers start to produce their. That's where we are coming from. And if we talk about solutions, our solutions, they are based on 3 main pillars. The first question is here, how to build a tamper-proof digital identity for a physical object. So as I said, crypto chip is the solution here. So in the end, by designing highly secure crypto chip that is resistant to the most common hardware hacking approaches, we can give a tamper-proof digital identity to any hardware object. And of course, the private key, which is the essential here, identifier here, and it is not visible to anybody. The chip itself, during the production, enriches the metadata that comes from customer or a vehicle, and then chip is registered on the blockchain. And once the chip is registered on the blockchain, the registered on the blockchain, when the chip has sent to the blockchain, then there is a challenge response between the blockchain and the chip, and in the end, blockchain confirms that the data is coming from a trusted data source. And once this chip is a tamper-proof identifier for a hardware, then we can also give an address for these hardwares that support the Bitcoin or Ethereum curves, and then they became enabled to do transactions. So, which means that adding a software to hardware, we have a fully-fledged wallet solution, and these pillars makes us possible to turn every physical object to a digital agent for new marketplaces, and also let us to create new business models in these marketplaces as well. So if we think about the blockchain projects that are happening so far in the market now, mostly more than 90% of them purely software based. They are using the blockchain technology as a data storage solution, but in this case, data that is inserted or sent to the blockchain is typically coming from traditional data sources. But because of the cryptographic security we have in the blockchain space, we are all aware the garbage in, garbage out problems. So what is really needed here, efficiently automate the process that based on the data. We need to establish trust into data sources as well. That's the main reason why these crypto chips should be embedded into the machines. And our target here is to make sure that data that is supposed to come from a vehicle is really coming from only that specific vehicle. And that can be used as the origin for a smart contract-based processes. That's the big difference that as Riddle&Code we want to establish at blockchain projects as a different layer of trusted sources. So with that, we started to reach out to industrial partners, and of course, like many other companies in blockchain industry, we developed a lot of MVP and POC projects, and ended up something like a product categorization that I want to share now. For example, we embedded a crypto chip and an antenna into analog watch, so we can really give a tamper-proof identity to the object of a luxury good or any art piece. But in this case of watch, it's interesting because normally the other blockchain projects are typically taking the serial number or something like that and put it on the blockchain. And of course, it doesn't guarantee that this serial number really able to guarantee that belongs to their real watch. So if you have a crypto chip and also an antenna, then it's 100% clear that is from an original watch, and then you have a wallet capability with it also. The other category, that is the machine identity. This could be the production and robots, but also the sensors in the broad IoT field. If you turn them into trusted data sources, you can, of course, not only prove that is the original device, but you can also create the data marketplaces with trusted data sets, something that will be relevant for machine-to-machine interoperability. And the third one is the vehicle ID, such as car wallet example that I will talk about later. I think especially for the self-driving vehicles, it will become more important because they really need to settle with the infrastructure that is surrounding them and also between the other vehicles. So this is an essential need for this industry. So since I said I want to talk about our blockchain hardware solutions for mobility and energy area, let me talk about our car wallets project that we created together with Daimler Mobility and a few other startups, which is called Daimler Mobility Blockchain Platform. So it was a MVP project, and that was initiated by Daimler Mobility in 2018. And we presented it in July 2019 as Mobility Blockchain Platform. It's a small consortium consisting of other startups, which were solution provider for human identity, blockchain platform, claim management, and also the smart contract designs. And as Riddle&Code, we provided in the project our hardware wallet solution. With this project, Daimler Mobility wanted to create a blockchain-based backend platform, but they said at the beginning they can only show this efficient backend solutions value if they can guarantee that the data is only coming from trusted sources. That's the reason why they contacted us at the beginning of the project to build our car wallet for the platform. And in the end, the goal of this project was to equip the vehicles in a way they become in the future business entities on their own. Of course, I mean here autonomous vehicles. They will have to perform against the infrastructure and potentially other vehicles as well. So for that reason, a car needs a digital identity to become addressable, and it has to be able to perform transaction capabilities. That's what we refer to when we talk about a car wallet. If we look at closer our use case in this project, you can assume that as a car rental process, and for e-contracting, first you need a digital ID on the user side, and then you need an address to enable the data sharing, and also you need a transaction capability for the settlement based on the business logic. And if you have all these three elements together, then you can turn the vehicles into trusted data sources and create end-to-end transactions and also automation. And then one of the other projects that we enabled in IoT space is called Mobility Blockchain Scooter project that we did together with Deutsche Telekom subsidiary T-Systems. Basically, it uses the same kind of approach, except for this case without fully car. but we were enabling a scooter rental with different project partners. In this project, for example, Yolocom, a Berlin-based company, they handled the user identity part of the project. And the target here, enabling the connectivity with IoT devices in a multimodal mobility setup while benefiting from the efficiencies of blockchain. And we also do projects in supply chain space for a leading large German industry player. We are monitoring the transport conditions of valuable parts because if you have a blockchain crypto chip equipped sensor attached to a transport container, you can monitor the transport conditions such as temperature, shock, or humidity. And if there's an accident or something change in these conditions, that affects the valuable parts or damage them, then you can go back to data and you can read it, and then you can share it with your partners and also with your insurance company where all these things happened. Here you see how the project is set up, that we designed the hardware for the sensors or transponders ourselves. We can, of course, adapt different regular transmission technologies here, but in this case, we use LoRa technology for our sensors. And once you have, again, an identity of a container, it means that you also have a digital twin of that. So you can work with that and automate processes based on trusted data sets. And last but not least, together with Wien Energy, Austria's leading utility provider, that we are doing, what we are doing is not only enabling e-charging, but we also enable peer-to-peer settlement and trading of energy between the inhabitants in local quarters. In our case, it's Viertel in Vienna. So with PV installations, we provide the energy, and because of the change in the regulatory landscape, we will be allowed to sell this energy to our neighbors and do trade between us. This is, of course, the leading situation where utility providers do not only need to upgrade their networks in order to enable these peer-to-peer capabilities, but they also need to upgrade their networks to basically become a financial system, because what will happen in this new marketplace is not only about the matchmaking between the producers and consumers, it's also about the microtransactions that need to be settled. And I think since the regulation is changing in most European countries and also internationally, many utility companies will have a similar direction in the near future. So yeah, these are the use cases that we implemented on mobility and energy industries. And if you have any question or if you have any interest in all these projects, please contact us.
Thank you, Aysenur. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the show, your company is very super. It's a very exciting company. The solution you came up with, the the idea of giving real IDs to the objects with the crypto chips, which you call. Since there were some discussions in the IoT ecosystem that most of the sensors and devices are lacking of processing cryptographic transactions, but the wafer that you got, the crypto chip, module that you got, will going to solve this problem. So I have a question for you about the supply chain area. Recent days, World Economic Forum has published a report called Redesigning Trust, Blockchain Deployment Toolkit. It's a guide to build more resilient supply chains on distributed ledgers. If you have a suitable blockchain use case for supply chain, actually this toolkit covers most of the aspects such as governance, the regulations, cryptographic techniques, and also interoperability. The reason I mention about this because World Economic Forum has made a comment that blockchain is not a silver bullet for the supply chains, but comparing with the traditional solutions, blockchain can provide much more flexibility when it comes to extraordinary occasions like we are experiencing right now with COVID. What are your thoughts about that? We're hearing most of the manufacturers are having issues, some problems with supplies. Can we expect more blockchain-based supply chain projects in the near future?
Well, thank you, Enes, for the question. As we all know that blockchain is a great technology for any place where we need trust and security. And as we talked about in our use case, for instance, the trusted logistic, it does not only provide trust for the suppliers or manufacturers, but also based on this trust, it solves many other complicated problems between the third parties and also solves the garbage in, garbage out problems in the data centers. So in the end, we can say that with blockchain, complex problems between the parties can be solved smoothly. But of course, for the scalability, we all know that supply chain needs more visible standardizations like other industries. What's happening now, I mean, for instance, financial industry or supply chain industry needs bigger projects to justify all these investments for all these technology developments, I can say.
Thank you very much, Aysenur. And then we are continuing with Berit. Berit, stage is all yours. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Let me also share my screen. We're based in different locations. Now it's working. A truly European company, I would say, Riddle&Code. Myself, I'm based in Amsterdam, so it made sense for me to control my own presentation. My name is Berit Fuss. I'm the director of Fintech for Riddle&Code. As Aysenur explained, we are active in a couple of different industries, or verticals as we call them. And one of them is the Fintech industry, which is not just the financial industry, but also, let's say, the new financial companies, crypto companies like that. And it's actually a very important target industry for us. So I'll talk a little bit more about specifically how we are approaching that fintech industry with our solution, and what also, again, what we can add, because we're not just a software company, but we have software and hardware. So let's first talk about the challenges that we have when we're talking about digital assets, whether those are crypto assets or more traditional financial assets that are being tokenized, and when we want to keep those assets actually safe, when we want to do the key management, when we want to manage those wallets. There's a couple of very unique challenges when it comes to digital assets compared to what we've known from decades before in the financial industry. And these are, first of all, of course, related to the complexity of different digital asset protocols or blockchain protocols, but also related to the fact that key management actually means something completely different when it comes to digital assets. We all know, of course, key management from processes like passwords and two-factor authentication, but they were always an extra gate to get access to something. When we're talking about digital assets, the key is actually the asset. An asset a lot of times isn't registered to a name or a person anymore, and you can claim them with your passport. No, you can only claim those assets when you have that one specific key, and not another key, not a copy of that key, only that one key. So that makes obviously key management really essential for this process, and very complex. Besides that, we're talking about a new type of infrastructure, decentralized infrastructure, that adds, of course, a lot of benefits, but sometimes it also causes complexity because it's not always compatible with the infrastructure that we already have. So that's a challenge that needs to be solved as well. There's more regulatory pressure. Maybe that's a negative way of phrasing it. At the same time, the attention from regulatory bodies has also been really good, because we're starting to get a little bit more clarity on what is allowed to be done and in what way. But it still means that industry really needs to step it up to a next level. And finally, yes, in the financial industry, we have a lot of standardization, but when it comes to digital assets, when it comes to crypto assets, they're not really standards there yet. So we figured, also based from the idea that Tom, our founder, had, that in that global economy, tokens, whether they represent a financial asset or an access token, or a data token or whatever, between all of these machines, between humans, between financial institutions, they're going to be playing a really important part in the future economy. So we decided, having that hardware, having that cryptographic knowledge, having already built a lot of software in relation to blockchain technology, that we can actually also provide a solution to manage digital assets and to manage those keys that is not just secure, but also convenient, that companies can also actually work with, not as cumbersome as some of the systems we've seen in the past few years, and that makes a really clever use of open source technology, and also we contribute to open source technology, because as this is still a new area, we do believe that it can be really beneficial to use open source technology that has been used, reviewed, and improved by thousands of others from the engineering community. And then we add our very specific knowledge, of course, on top of that. So that allowed us actually to create a solution that, first of all, is highly secure. A couple of things that's very important for us when we talk about key management, which is those keys, those secrets, we never store them on a single device. I mean, that's just creating what we call an attack vector, creating a possibility of someone to steal those keys, or worst case, lose them, and you've only stored them on one device completely. So that's just too risky. We don't do that. The second thing is, financial processes aren't always, very straightforward or very low risk. So we need to be able to implement, in any case, a situation where you can sign off on transactions or processes with multiple people. So that's also what we've added, and we can do that regardless of the underlying protocol. And then finally, if you really look at the role of a custodian, it's not just, transaction functionality. There are other responsibilities that come with it that are in the area of compliance, reporting, transparency, etc. So we're actually using a stack chain approach to give those different capabilities to our customers that are custodians in this area. And then actually we created a wallet solution, a very first wallet solution that got accepted by the FINMA in Switzerland as being allowed to be implemented within a traditional bank offering crypto services to their customers. But security, of course, is not all. You need to also design a solution that's future-proof. Quite some investments are being made in this area, and you don't want to have a solution that's outdated tomorrow. So it needs to be able to continue developing and evolving over time. And we do that by a couple of different ways. Distributed architecture approach, where we can, we use the distribution to avoid single points of failure. Innovative security concept, I'll tell a little bit more about that in a second. I already mentioned the open source, of course, agile development, and that basically gives us a tool that can not only keep assets safe today, but that can completely support the token economy of tomorrow as well. So if we break that down, future-proof digital asset custody solution is three things. First of all, secure. Second of all, compliant. We are acting, in an industry that is faced with a lot of regulation. Crypto industry, not yet, but increasingly so in a variety of countries around the world. And it needs to be flexible. We really see with our customers that everyone has a different approach to business, and you need to be able to give that business flavor also to the solutions that you're using for your custody. So let me just zoom in on those three concepts a little bit. So first of all, our approach to security, and security is really the baseline. Without it being secure, there's no point at looking at a custody solution anymore. A couple of elements very important. First of all, we're using multi-party computation for transaction signing. If you've looked a little bit into key management, you've probably come across this, and this is a very important a pillar of our security approach, because it basically prevents us from having to communicate what we call raw secrets, or even raw parts of secrets between devices, between different elements of our software, but rather everything is encrypted. And because again we use known and identified devices and identified pieces of software to sign those transactions, they're able to kind of continue a computation of the previous device without having to, you know, decrypt a secret. And that basically reduces the vulnerability incredibly. Besides that, we cryptographically secure a lot of processes in our solution as well, not just the communication between devices, but also policies. And we'll have a look at that. And those policies are actually very vital for operating a business within a legal framework, within a set of business rules. And we can enforce those because we secure them. Obviously, end-to-end security approach, not, you know, from the chip to the integration and the APIs and everything in between. And then finally, of course, decentralization. I already mentioned that, but it's also a security aspect as well. Then for compliance, like I mentioned, whether our customer is a financial institution, they are already complying to a lot of regulation. And if they're adding new products and services, they still need to do that. On top of it, we see that crypto companies around the world, and especially in Europe, they are, you know, being forced to comply with regulation as well. So we offer actually compliance on a couple of different levels. First level is the transaction level. Around the transaction, we collect and we store metadata around that transaction on a separate blockchain. It's a protocol that we developed ourselves, which is partially open source and partially ours. And that basically allows to give full transparency, full auditability, not just what transactions have happened, but also under which conditions and with which authorizations. If you draw that even further, it adds the capability of reconciliation and settlement of those transactions against, for example, customer accounts and the fiat accounts. Then more on a solution level or operational level, our custody solution provides role-based access. We all know that within companies, different people have different functions. They have different roles. They have probably different authorization levels. And with our solution, we have that, you know, integrated to the core, that we can assign different authorizations to different people. One of the things that's you know, very typical to implement here is that the people who are allowed to sign transactions are not the same people who are allowed to change the rules around signing transactions, right? And that gives, you know, a lot of added security, but it's also in compliance with a lot of regulations. Now, these kind of approval flows, they can be business driven, but of course also regulatory driven. And then finally, what's quite interesting, we see in the crypto industry, that companies work a lot with centralized hot wallets, and then they've got cold storage that's very difficult to get access to. If a bank would like to offer crypto service, they're used to having, you know, individual accounts for each and every customer, and it kind of clashes with the setup of that. Besides, you know, security issues with it. With our solution, we actually provide our customers with the possibility to create segregated full custodial wallets for their customers and have full asset segregation as well. And then finally, on an industry level, I already mentioned, you know, market authority acceptance. We go through audits, code reviews, work with regulators wherever we can to also get formal acceptance. We have been implementing our solution in regulated financial institutions successfully. We work usually really closely with them to make sure that you know, that everything works as it should. And I think one of the latest topics that we've been working a lot on the past year is actually integrating with anti-money laundering provisions as well. And then finally, the final concept is about flexibility, and not just flexibility towards the future, but also flexibility to our individual customers. And also to recognizing that different assets have different requirements around it. So I already mentioned that we enable multi-signature schemes for every kind of asset, but we have a variety of those. You know, only sign transactions in one location, allow transactions over different locations, time delayed authorization, where you can come up with a whole bunch of different types of schemes there. We provide the possibility of both manual and automated transaction signing. You know, do you need someone, an actual person to check something and push a button, or is it a transaction that can go through as long as conditions are met? We have what we say algorithmic flexibility, so we can really support any kind of asset, you know, regardless of the underlying protocol. Again, on a solution level, we have a lot of different APIs for integration towards core banking systems, front end, you know, AML, chain analysis kind of providers. And we use what is called forward deterministic key derivation, which basically allows us to create an unlimited amount of wallets, but manage them from one solution. So even, you know, even if you have hundreds of wallets, high complexity, or thousands of wallets, you can manage it from one solution. And I think that's really what adds the convenience and also the scalability towards the future. And then finally, if we tie this story in with the chips and tags and everything Aysenur explained about, we basically have, you know, a set of solutions that can support even the most complex tokenization use cases. I already mentioned it a little bit in between. I also noticed we're getting towards the end of the time, so I'll keep this short. What I wanted to say here mostly is that we work with really a wide spectrum of customers, from crypto native companies like funds, asset managers, or even, you know, some of the larger crypto exchanges, to traditional financial institutions, banks, exchanges that are adding either crypto services or that are, you know, enabling the trading of any kind of digital assets for their customers. I think, you know, besides the elements Aysenur mentioned, besides the custody, we don't really stop there. I already mentioned we use a metadata blockchain for the full auditability, but it's also what helps us enable really high throughput transactions, that helps us add those collective signatures. We are one of the first companies to support, you know, the DID, so that's the standard for digital identities for machines, but also for code, which of course is very interesting when you're talking about software-based agents. And then we have an integration, and we are live with the Liquid network as well, that allows us actually to establish interoperability between blockchain networks, gives us full tokenization capability, and of course really adds, you know, high performance blockchain network to our solution as well. Yeah, so that was my story.
Thank you, Berit, for sharing your story with us. I have a quick question for you. You know, banks now providing crypto services to, it's a trending thing right now. And it all first started in Switzerland with FINMA giving crypto banking licenses to Seba Bank and Signum Bank in the last August. And recently, in this week actually, in US, JP Morgan has agreed to extend its banking services to some crypto exchanges. I think this is a great opportunity for the financial ecosystem, and it will also demand new security solutions as well, like you just mentioned earlier. How would you interpret this?
Well, I think, you know, there's a couple of different things at play that enable these, and of course they're slightly different, right? So in Switzerland, we're talking about two already crypto-oriented companies that actually were able to acquire banking and security licenses so that they can offer a full spectrum of services, not just crypto, but also bank accounts and security trading. But it's really about bridging that gap, right, between the crypto and the traditional financial world. And then we have JP Morgan, who now acquired Coinbase and Gemini crypto exchanges as their customer, and provide them with, first of all, a bank account, but also really, you know, trusted banking services with a large name, with a large bank like JP Morgan. And I think there's the different things that are at play are threefold. First of all is I think there's more acceptance from regulators for crypto, leaving a little bit of space. But the second thing I think is even more important is that we're starting to see a little bit more clarity from regulators, what they are expecting in terms of compliance to regulation and the applicability of certain laws and regulation to digital assets in the broadest sense of the word. And then the third thing, that I see, and Gemini and Coinbase, they were always front runners, I think, in this. They were, very eager to comply from the beginning. I think Gemini had that even in its original mission statement, the first regulated and accepted exchange. They have been really working hard at acquiring certifications around security, but we also hear it from customers and crypto exchanges that we are talking to, that they're really stepping it up and let's say bringing their own operations, their reporting, their compliance, their IT security to a next level. So it actually also becomes possible for banks to bridge that gap, because of course banks need to do a risk assessment before they get customers on board, and that's also valid for companies and for crypto companies. And you just see that they're slowly moving together. But like I said in the beginning, that's not an easy feat. There's a couple of challenges to overcome. And it needs both that security as well as that flexibility of being able to implement rules to make sure you can always enforce those rules. And then, that's what audits are all about. Afterwards, be able to prove the fact that you did follow those rules. And I think that's also why we build up our solution like we did, with all of the different elements in there, because we believe that it helps bridge that gap.
Thank you, Berit, for your nice answer. I'm very thankful to you for joining us today, contributing this talk. It was very fascinating to listen to your story and your amazing use cases again. Thank you for that.